baby now. Well, I love my baby, I'm still learning how. Hey, 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 I'm okay.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pathways to Parenting Success. I'm your host, Dr. Jan Hittleman, Director of Boulder Psychological Services, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening. We have a great topic to cover tonight, Race to Somewhere, What We're Doing Right. And this is a follow-up discussion to the Race to Nowhere movie that I think many folks in the community had seen a couple years back. And we're going to discuss some of the things that we're doing right for our kids in school and strategies for the future. We have a fantastic panel for you this evening, and I want to remind our viewers that you can be involved in this discussion by emailing your question to our website. Simply go to boulderpsychologicalservices.com, click on the Submit Questions icon, and we'll have your question here live for our panelists to answer. So if you're watching at home, participate in the conversation. For folks that are here in our live audience, we have index cards and pens for you. Please feel free to write down questions for us, and we will ask them to our panelists as well. I would like to introduce our panelists this evening. Starting to my left, we have the Assistant Superintendent of the Boulder Valley School District, Dr. Deirdre Pilch. Welcome, Deirdre. Next to Deirdre, we have Andrew Tucker. Andrew is the Director of Counseling for the Boulder Valley School District. We also have Kevin Brainey, who is the Principal of Boulder High School. Next to Kevin, we have Terry Galach, who's the principal of Southern Hills Middle School. Next to Terry, we have Melissa Potus, who is the principal of Monarch K-8. And next to Melissa, we have John Dunn, who's the principal of September School, which is an independent nonprofit school in Boulder. And then we also have Dan Fox, a licensed professional counselor, and Susan Dennison, a licensed clinical social worker. And a student's voice this evening, I'm proud to introduce Hannah Edgar, who is a student at Fairview High School. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you all being here. And we're going to also have a few short videos that we're going to show tonight. And in a minute, we're going to start with a video about the Race to Nowhere movie. And let me just mention, as we get that video ready for you, several years back, the Race to Nowhere movie was shown throughout this community and other communities throughout the country, and it really focused on a lot of the issues related to stress of our students. It focused a lot on secondary, but it also talked about elementary students as well, and they focused on a wide range of topics, which included things like the amount of homework that kids do at night and how stressful that is for them and their families, the pressure that a lot of kids feel to get super terrific grades so they can go to the Ivy League school of their choice, as well as other issues like the late start and the issue of starting secondary school too early in terms of the sleep cycle that we know that adolescents have, where they often can't go to sleep until 11 or 12 at night, and then somehow we anticipate them getting up very early to go to school at 6:30, 7:30, when in fact we know that they really need about 9 hours of sleep each evening. So we're going to be talking about some of these different issues, but I'd like to first show our viewers and our panelists the updated trailer to the Race to Nowhere movie, if we have that ready.
I can't really remember the last time I had a chance to go out in the backyard and just run around.
You have to have all A's, you have to have these extracurriculars.
You stuff as much information into your brain as possible, and as soon as you're done with it, out it goes.
I wasn't eating, I wasn't even taking care of myself.
I couldn't cope.
There have been 6 suicides in our school district.
Our students are pressured to perform. They're not necessarily pressured to learn, especially learn deeply and conceptually.
Things that actually get our students to think and care are pushed aside.
The pressure came from the colleges, from the parents, from the government, but it has to stop.
We have to change the ideology of what makes a good educational system, what type of individual are we trying to create.
We want kids to develop socially, emotionally, artistically, physically. That means we stop reducing children to test scores. We have to say 6 hours a day of academics is enough, and there's no reason to make kids work with second shift.
These kids come to the table with this creativity and this love of learning. Let's just not take it out of them.
There's a movement taking place across the country.
It's Race to Nowhere, the documentary that's getting people riled up one auditorium at a time.
It's called Race to Nowhere.
A town hall conversation picks up where the film leaves off.
It highlights the collateral damage that we're inflicting on our students.
Timothy Slickar opted out his 5th grade son of the standardized test.
We are no longer numbers, but we are students.
There are schools who have eliminated AP courses.
One New Jersey high school wants to give students a complete break during the holiday.
They got this idea from this film.
This film is a poignant reminder that straight A's and high SAT scores are not the holy grail. We all want our kids to excel, but I'd take a happy child over a depressed success any day of the week.
And let's start with just some feedback from our panel. And I'm really interested to know specifically your opinion in terms of whether you feel like students are under stress. Do you think that's true? And maybe what are some of the things that you've seen going on in your school or in your life that you've noticed where there's been some changes? The other thing that I'd like to mention too, which I'm really proud of, is I had the opportunity, along with several of the Boulder Valley schools, to host the movie. So this certainly was not something that the school district shied away from. They really, I thought, joined the process and really wanted to get community feedback and really look at addressing some of these issues. So I turn to my panelists. Would anyone like to start us off? Feedback on the trailer? Everyone's shy. Yes, Dan.
I just want to say a little something about that last phrase, the happy child versus depressed success. I feel like that's part of our challenge, is that we actually need both. Happiness and success go hand in hand. So if we're creating a system that isn't preparing our kids for success outside of school, then I think we're not creating a situation where they're going to have this long-term happiness. So there's this sort of balancing act that I think we're looking for, and I don't know, I'm just curious what other people have to say about finding success and having that kind of happiness at the same time.
In other words, can you have both?
Yeah.
And not have to
Well,
choose
it depends
one
on how
or
you
the other?
define success. They're dead on the money. I mean, stress is everywhere in my area. I mean, if you look at the kids, we do surveys with the 8th grade kids, and you do simple things like Wordles. And what comes out on these Wordles, these huge stress is right there. Their number one thing that they talk about high school. What they're worried about is stress. And it doesn't start, obviously, when they go into the doors of the high school. It's in our level. I'm at a middle level. And they feel the pressure. They feel the pressure even if they don't want to feel the pressure, because they're looking at their friends who are getting pressured. And so it's a sad state of affairs, actually. It's no fun to see. You do everything you can to alleviate it. But in a competitive society, in a competitive district that has, open enrollment for every school, there's no doubt in my mind parents compare schools based on how they're achieving or their perception of success. And so I think the district has actually done a lot of good things to try to counteract this push. And I'm sure we'll get into that later, but that's where I see.
And I'm assuming, and you could, respond as you feel appropriate, but I'm assuming that this is a challenge that doesn't really rest on any one group's shoulders. In other words, I don't see the schools in isolation being able to address this issue. It's also family support, perhaps family pressure in terms of grades, et cetera, and community. I actually had the pleasure of meeting with a young man today who is a middle school student in our school district, who was referred to me for issues around depressed mood and anxiety. And, he shared with me that in his case, his parents don't put any pressure on him. The pressure comes from himself and what he termed the community, which I thought was really interesting. And so that's his experience, but I'm sure it's unique to every student. Anyone else? have anything
Jan,
they'd
I
like
think
to add?
the one thing that I would like to mention is today I was fortunate to visit with some of our school interventionists or social workers who are in high schools and middle schools. And we were reviewing the YRBS data, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey data from students in Boulder Valley School District and St. Vrain, and talks about some of the challenges our students are experiencing. And I think that, you know, one of the things that occurs to me as principal of Boulder High that certainly is part of the film is also just recognizing the stress that students are experiencing growing up. I mean, there's so many other stresses that are going on with our students, not just in terms of the additional academic pressure or the pressure to perform. I think that, you know, when I look at that data, I was thinking about all the other influences that sometimes we don't really have a chance to talk about. And I think that data really speaks volumes to how fortunate we are in Boulder Valley School District, and specifically at Boulder High School, to have two partners with the city through the interventionist program that helps support students and parents and families. And that has really been an invaluable thing for our school. So in that sense, Jan, going back to this idea that it's bigger than just one school, it's bigger than the school district, it's the whole community having a conversation about all those influences on our students.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin, you mentioned the interventionist. Maybe you can just explain to the audience, you know, if they have a student at school, how that service works and when is it appropriate to access the interventionist.
Okay. Thanks, Jan. I think that it's appropriate any time that someone feels necessary or a family does. But, you know, at Boulder High School, for example, we have two interventionists, and they're employed by the city of Boulder. Students and families have complete confidentiality with some social workers who have the ability to support students with all kinds of challenges, whether it's mental health, substance use, and whatever else might be going on in a student's life and family, and really working with a student right there in the building. There's two offices right next to our library, and there's some immediate accessibility, which is wonderful, and then and they can help coordinate and connect students and families to other resources in the community, sometimes for long-term support.
And these are licensed mental health professionals, correct?
Yeah.
And I believe they're in all of the high schools and some of the middle schools. Would I be characterizing that
That's true.
correctly?
Yes.
Thank you, Kevin. Anyone else? Any comments? Susan?
So I just want to say to you how thrilled I am to have all those interventionists. They refer to me often, but as well as just having somebody to collaborate with. What I'm seeing a lot of is I took the Race to Nowhere's guidebook and printed out a survey. And on that survey, it was several pages long, and many of the questions were: how much sleep are you getting a night? How many activities are you involved in? How much homework do you have a night? Who are your supports? It's just tons and tons of questions. But what I'm seeing presenting in my office, and again, this is just a small snapshot, so it's not obviously everybody, I want to just state that, is kids who have very, very high levels of anxiety. Most of them are not sleeping well. They may be getting maybe 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night. Oftentimes, you know, again, they're in school all day, they come home, they may have activities to do, and then they're jumping into homework. And I think, Hannah, maybe you can speak to this one. I have kids that are doing homework until 2:30 in the morning, and then sometimes getting up at 4:30, 5:30 to do their homework. And they are really feeling that pressure to be able to compete, to get into the good schools. I have one kiddo who was telling me that she felt like she was 100% sure that she would not get into a good school if she didn't excel in school, in any school, which is, you know, definitely all or nothing thinking, but I'm seeing a lot of those kinds of things happening, severe depression. I had 2 kids that wound up in the hospital at Centennial Peaks because of school pressure and stress. And I think, you know, the families are pretty much on board. I had to do some education with them around back off from the homework and the push and all of that, because it's creating more challenges. And I know that it's also can be a family situation where they're really pressuring to get the A's and all. But it is really concerning to me to see kids with their nervous systems really, really ramped up and no way to kind of de-stress. So then what we do is try not to throw more things at them to, figure out how to handle the stress, because we're really speaking to a cultural issue, I think. It goes beyond just how do I handle my stress. So I don't know if you want to speak a little to that.
It's definitely true that I know a lot of kids and myself who at least 3 times a week, I get home from school. I usually go right up to my room, start my homework, and I don't get done until 7 o'clock when my parents call me down for dinner. I come right back up. I'm still just bombed with homework, and I'm up till 11:30, 12, three times a week. And then I get up at 5, I get a shower, and then I go right back to doing homework, because everybody and all the adults tell us that we need sleep and we need to eat right and take care of ourselves. But then on the other side, the teachers and everyone who's pressuring the teachers and the students, we feel that if we don't meet their expectations and we don't meet our own expectations for colleges or whatever career you want to do, then we're just not going to succeed, and we'd rather succeed than take care of ourselves and sleep. And a lot of us get used to not having enough sleep a night. I know friends and other students, at least from Fairview, who come into school crying because they didn't get their homework done. And these are high school students stressed over something that I think we get too much of. But I'm not against homework at all. I think it helps us with learning the material that we learn that day, and we retain it better. But to have 30 problems in one night, for example, in math, why can't we just have 15 of those problems and we'll learn the same amount? Why do we have to have double the amount, double the time? And then on top of that, how are we supposed to connect with our families? I never see my parents. They ask me to go places with them, to go to concerts. I can never do that because I have too much homework. And, I love music and I love spending time with people, but right now, I feel like it doesn't even matter, because I want to get into a good college. I want to succeed, but I can't if I don't do my homework, and if I don't get A's and B's or above 3.5 GPA. It's just not possible and then whenever you don't sleep at night, how are you supposed to focus during school? Everybody's tired, there's kids falling asleep in class. I don't think that that's right. I think that the homework load should definitely be cut down, but I'm just getting my voice out there, and everybody else's who's talked to me about this and who's complained to me. And my parents don't pressure me about homework, and they don't pressure me about succeeding in school, because they know that I have that expectation and I have my own expectations to meet. But there are parents out there who just pressure their kids. I had a 16th birthday over Christmas break, and I had a party, but one of my friends couldn't come because she was studying. She couldn't come to a Sweet 16 because she was studying over Christmas break. What's the point of having Christmas break if you're just going to stay in your house and study? That's pretty
Thanks,
much
Hannah. And here's a related question that we got from our viewing audience. This is from Carol in Boulder. I'm very concerned about the huge workloads and stress levels that the high school students in our community are shouldering. I see kids with anxiety and depression among my friends' children. The school days start early, the kids are up late with homework and activities. What are our high schools doing to limit the load on these kids? Anyone dare field that question?
Well, I think it's really, really important, first of all, to honor the complexity of education as a human institution, and one with which we hope to improve all of our situation, the situation of everyone globally, frankly, and that is the scale that a lot of educators think on. So I think what we observe sometimes is a lot of good people involved in the lives of these young people. That's educators, that's families, those are community members, both locally and globally. And what is a whole bunch of support can manifest as additional stress and pressure. So the well-wishing can, in fact, if you reiterate too many times, lead to a browbeating and communicate some sort of expectation of very high achievement, which is, of course, what we all want to see in our young people. But we have a culture, and I appreciate that you broadened it that widely. I think that the culture at large is, of course, influenced by and influences education. So we have dire headlines out there, and we talk about fiscal cliffs and this kind of alarming rhetoric, and that our teenagers are not below understanding what all of that means. And so, I guess I'm even getting a little complicated myself, but it's a complex realm. We're trying to support young folks. Some of that is learning is aided by repetition and by approaching subject matter from a variety of angles. And it seems like sometimes it infiltrates your sleep and actually your chance at baseline happiness, which I think involves eating well, sleeping, exercising, all of these basic human needs. And school can become a distraction.
And I'm curious from the panelists, too, as we delve into this issue, advice for families. I'm a dad, and I see my child struggling like this at home. What should I do that would be appropriate?
So,
Go ahead, Deirdre. Sorry.
So Jan, I think one of the most important things for families to know is that our schools want to work with them. And so call us, call our schools, talk with the school counselor, talk with the teacher, talk with the assistant principal, the principal. If the first contact you make isn't open and doesn't seem like they really want to work with you as a family, make another contact with another official at that school or here at the district level. Because I think we don't always know that there's 7 or 8 teachers, each assigning 30 problems or whatever it is that is being assigned. And until that's brought to our attention, and then we can work with the system in that way. And so I would really encourage parents to contact us, contact the school directly, and to work with the school on these issues so that we can all work on it together.
And Jan, I'd like to go back and just thank Hannah for sharing her voice. I mean, I know that probably took a lot of courage to share all that. And as a principal of one of our big high schools, I really appreciate your reflection on your experiences in that, in terms of some of the things that we're trying to do well in our schools and make things work. I go back to, my experience a few years ago with Principal Stensrud and the work that happened as both Boulder High School and Fairview shifted to a later start. I know a lot of people would like it later, but moving from 7:30 to 8. And then I think the other piece that I'm sensing too is that many more people are open to the conversation. At first, while there was lots of potential resistance up front, I think now that we've been doing this little thing that I hope is helping just a little bit in your experiences and other students, just that half an hour has really made a remarkable difference, not just for students but also for staff who are also experiencing some of the same stress that I think our students are talking about as well.
I'd like to add something else too, is that I think if we're giving advice to families, as a counselor, we see lots of students come in very, very stressed, very worried about college admissions, very worried about being admitted to the elite institutions. And I think that we oftentimes overestimate the importance of attendance at elite institutions. There are so many wonderful institutions of higher learning in this country that admit 90% or more of their students. Students can receive a wonderful higher education at virtually every college and university in this country. And just because you can be admitted at this elite institution, it doesn't mean it's the right place for everybody. And I think that people strive for that maybe unnecessarily and oftentimes to the detriment of their students and their children. So maybe relax on that a little bit.
So maybe the perception of how high that GPA has to be is really a misnomer on some level.
It can be, yes. It absolutely can be because, not everybody can go, nor should they go to the most elite institutions.
Right.
That's the way it is, and that's okay.
And I
And
mentioned to the
elite
family-
is who, you also have to wonder who's the judge of the elite.
And, you know, I think it's fair to say, and you're here to comment as well, panelists, that we're in a community that has this kind of very high expectation. Everyone has to go to a great school. And, you know, like I mentioned to the family I was with today, there's not enough room in Harvard for everybody. So we have to be realistic.
I mean, Harvard, if you think about it, there are 10,000 or so high schools in the nation. Every valedictorian thinks that if every high school believes that they are qualified to go to Harvard, and Harvard has about 1,500 seats per freshman class, it's just not going to happen. And that's okay. It doesn't need to happen. There are great institutions of higher learning across this nation. Many, many, many of them.
Let me ask a question, too, to some of the administrators that are here. Let's assume that a parent observes that their child, let's say it's a high school student, is doing 3 or 4 hours of homework every night, and they're concerned that it's too much homework. And they come to the school and they say, you know, I have this concern. What can the school do? I mean, that seems like a tough problem to solve, too. What would be the recourse of the school in that kind of a situation?
Mr. High School Administrator, would you like to answer that one?
Sure, in the middle school, sure. Well, I think coming to the school and having a conversation with the counselor and or the administrator or principal about, you know, what that looks like and what a student's course load looks like is probably one of the first things that we would do. You know, my experiences have been that we have lots of very self-motivated students who want to perform very well and want to take rigorous classes for a variety of reasons. And sometimes, at least in our work, we have made a big effort to try and be as flexible as we can with students who maybe sometimes need to take a step back and reduce their load. Because at the same time, I would also be saying to a family, you know, and I think I've said this often, that, you know, the beauty of being in a comprehensive high school is really also as much and as important as taking advantage of the arts, the music programs, and the athletic programs. So, you know, that is a very critical piece of the experience. So looking at the whole situation for a student and what they're experiencing at our school, I think having a personal conversation with them and their family, finding options about reducing course load if necessary, or finding study partners or tutors or other things that we have in our school, you know, in terms of resources to give students a little bit of support to be able to manage the workload, and then potentially look down the road to change if they didn't want to make an initial change right up front. But my point overall being is, you know, I know that our counseling staff at Boulder High School and administrators are trying and want to be open to that conversation. And I would echo Deirdre's point that sometimes we don't always have an opportunity to have that. So, you know, I think that partnership needs to grow. And certainly on our end, you know, we would like to invest more in that and have more conversation about, you know, making the best experience possible for our students.
You know, that's not just at middle level, or high school, but middle level and elementary as well. And each student is so unique, and so the same amount of homework assigned can take one student an hour or two, and another one 3 or 4. And we don't know what happens until we have that conversation. So that's one of the things that like you said again and again, call us, talk to us. You know, with elementary, it's one teacher typically. With middle level, it's a smaller team of teachers who probably talk more than they do at the high school because it's the same teachers who have the same kids. But those conversations are just powerful. You know, there's a lot of balance that can be taken care of with conversations. We also uncover what else is going on in family lives. You know, sometimes the amount of time it takes to get homework done is because there's all these other things going on, that economic stress, too many activities, you know, moving around. And so sometimes we end up doing more social emotional support than academic support because that's really what they needed to get that homework managed. So.
If I could, let me be in sort of a wet blanket on this one. But you're swimming against a cultural tide here that is very, very difficult to change. And it's not just academic. I mean, think about people that are soccer, volleyball. These kids are practicing year-round now when they're in 3rd and 4th grade. This is ridiculous. So parents are equating this stuff to success. It transfers into the academic realm where they think the more homework you have, the more rigorous the school is. We have complete open enrollment in Boulder Valley. There is competition in Boulder Valley. Until that is minimized, we are going to be fighting a very difficult battle here because, and I've done it in open enrollment tours. There are people out here that have seen my open enrollment tours when I would say, we have policies in my building to limit homework. I've had parents come right up to me and say, you're off the list. Fine, but that is difficult for high schools to say. If I was sitting in a high school, I think it'd be very difficult for them to say, we're going to really try to limit homework.
Why
We know
would it be
it's
difficult for them?
I think it would be very difficult because I think you're back in a competitive environment where your clientele, the people that are shopping your schools, and everybody's kind of nodding up here, people that are shopping your schools equate success of a school to the amount of homework they're giving. They equate it to rigor. And we know research-wise that isn't true, but that is so pervasive out there that it's very difficult to argue with. And homework's increased a great deal since we were in school. And so it's, with people our age, we're in school. So it's really, from an administrative standpoint, it's a difficult conversation to have. So we were able to do it in our school but we went through a long process to do it. And kids, again, still have homework and things like that, but we really try to limit it. And it has been a big success, actually. But, so what was it replaced with? Now I've got kids playing baseball 3 hours a night, trying to be the next person to get drafted and stuff like that. So they're really, if it's not one thing, it's another in our culture about pushing kids to be something that we want them to be, not necessarily asking what they want to be. And I see that a lot. And, it's hard to watch, I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty difficult.
I think Terry's right on point, identifying that, actually echoing what I've heard up here, which is reaching out and making the personal touch, making that connection, getting to know that student. That's the best thing parents can do. It's the best thing educators can do. I know that the schools do their best to provide that space, and I think it pays off. Now, homework for homework's sake is very limited value, if completely worthless. But if we're talking about content and covering content and familiarizing ourselves with material, and that goes over into the evenings. I used to teach English, and a reading schedule would typically happen in the evenings so that the students can get through the books. But homework for homework's sake, teaching an hour lecture, and then handing the handout on the way out the door and saying, here's your homework. And if that is happening 5-6 times a day, number one, the administration may not know, but it really is overburdening the students. I don't want anyone to hand me 6 or 7 worksheets on my way out the door. And so it's a delicate dance, and we have to try to make sure our students are being exposed to the materials that will help them create opportunity for themselves and empower them to be successful humans. But you've got to communicate with the students, and that's for parents, that's for educators. The students are the key. It's the whole point. Education happens with the teacher and the student. And so if we leave the students out of the equation, I think we're going to be missing the point at least partly.
And Kevin spoke earlier about this. We're going to show in just a little while a short video from CBS News that talks about the issue of late start and sleep, et cetera. And I could be wrong, but I think that the Race to Nowhere movie really helped to move our district in the direction of late start, both at Boulder High School and Fairview High School. And I agree with Kevin, maybe it needs to be later. When you look at the research, they really talk about 8:30 and later. So we're not quite there yet, but we've made a good step in the right direction. And I know that Don Stensrud, who's the principal at Fairview High School, sat on panels with me when we did the Race to Nowhere movie. And I think he was really invested in the idea, and he made it happen at Fairview. He did it appropriately. Some of you may recall, he surveyed all the teachers, surveyed all the parents, the students, and only after getting a sense that his community really felt strongly about this, they moved forward, and now they do have a later start. Hopefully they'll continue to chip away at that start time and make it even later. But let's take a look at that video, that CBS News video on sleep with adolescents.
America, it's that time of year. Back to school. When the morning bell rings, students in the 9th grade and up have to be at their desks by about 7 a.m. Grown-ups who start work at that hour get sympathy and coffee. Most teenagers don't get either of those things. I'm not suggesting that kids these days have it harder than the ones of yesteryear who commonly did hard labor. But there is something about the start time of the school day that just doesn't work anymore. The public school system was organized when farming was our dominant industry, and most women didn't work outside the home. But now many do, and not so much on farms, which leaves a lot of kids with latchkey hours and a lot of women struggling to arrange flexible work schedules in industries that can't allow it. On top of that, scientists have discovered that older kids go through what's called a sleep phase delay, a shift in their internal clocks that makes them fall asleep later and wake up later. Many teenagers can't physically conk out until 11 or even midnight, but they still need to be up before 6. That's brutal. And it's not just my opinion. University of California sleep researcher Sarah Mednick once told me that giving people less than 5 hours of sleep is an effective form of torture. 40 years ago, we got on average about 2 more hours a night. Today, we're chronically sleep deprived. Our culture treats it like a pleasant diversion, a pastime for the unambitious. Sleep is fundamental to cognitive functioning. Slow-wave deep sleep helps your brain move information from short-term to long-term memory. Not a bad thing if you're trying to learn. Some school districts that tried starting the school day later found that attendance improved, students were late less often, they made fewer trips to the nurse, and they were generally more alert. If we tweaked the start time of the school day to line up with kids' circadian rhythms and our own grown-up work schedules, students would be able to think better and therefore perform better. More women would be able to work regular hours, so rah-rah gender equality, and overall, people would be less tortured. That's worth the hubbub of rearranging bus schedules, don't you think?
Discover card, cashback cost.
CBS News tried to get a commercial in, but we cut it out. Why can't we make it 8:30? I'll be the naive questioner. Why can't we just make it happen? What's stopping us?
So Jan, they're all looking at me.
I noticed that.
So I think, we're a large system, and it took us a while to move this system to this 30 minutes, 35 minutes later start, and the end of the day, 30 to 35 minutes later. One of the worries with moving too late is what happens in the evening with students and what happens with after-school activities. We don't want to carve into the evening with the practices and the rehearsals so much that we now have kids staying up even later to do homework. And so part of it is, for us, is just learning what this means for the families within Boulder Valley School District and hearing from the families and their children on what works for them. I fully expect us to continue to look at this and really to look at it across our high schools and look at what's right for each of the high school communities in terms of a later start and ending that school day a little later. And as Mr. Brainy mentioned, I know it's an ongoing conversation at the high school. They all enjoy and appreciate the later start. It's better for staff, it's better for students. The results have been very positive. And so I expect for it to be a continued conversation for us.
I know there's a lot of sleepy kids that would appreciate that. Dan.
So at September School a number of years ago, we actually experimented with this, and we were trying to get a group of students who were willing to start one period later and then have an 8th period into their day. And there were only a few classes that were offered 8th period, but if they were willing to do that, then they could start later. So most of the students wanted to start later, but we actually couldn't get enough students to run an 8th period class because the idea of having to stick around until after 4 o'clock when the vast majority of their social world was leaving was very tricky. So I love the idea, and I wonder if there's ways to kind of experiment it with like a coalition of the willing, but I found that when we tried that out, it was very difficult to actually get a group that wanted to take that research and make it a reality in their world.
I think it's important to note, however, that we do start at 8:30. Now, our size makes that a lot easier.
Right.
We're one school, and so we don't have busing. We don't have, although our students can access Boulder Valley School District sports, athletic teams, clubs, and all that wonderful stuff, it's just a lot easier to affect the schedule of the day. So we actually do go 8:30 to 3:10, and the school district moving that half hour in favor of teen sleep habits represents a really impressive shift. I think that's a real positive thing.
So Jan, part of it, you know, when we started talking about, and I think I was on the very first committee 6-8 years ago, when we first started talking about a later start for high schools, there's all these worries about what will happen. You know, kids will be missing more class to get to their athletic events, and we'll lose our athletes. I mean, all kinds of worries. So part of the work for us has just been having our 2 largest high schools step out there and move their start time and their end time and show that this really works, and that it's okay, and that we haven't had a big problem with the after-school activities or with traveling away to athletics and those kinds of things. And so I think the courage that those schools have shown and taking that leadership has set a great example for the rest of the high schools, and I think for Colorado, to really look at, you know, what can the system tolerate? You know, can we go from 8:30 to 3:30 instead of 8 to 3? You know, what can we tolerate?
And I remember I was working at Boulder High School when they undertook this big shift, and the research showed that even by moving the school day 30 minutes later, it didn't mean that students just stayed up 30 minutes later. They went to bed at the time that they had originally gone to bed, so they actually were getting 30 more minutes of sleep. So,
and Boulder Valley has a precedent. I mean, the middle schools used to start at 7:30, quite a while, ways back, and now we start at basically 8:40, and that happened overnight, and that was a busing issue. But all of a sudden, we started 1 hour later, and there was actually people kind of up in arms a little bit that it was starting too late, but it's worked out pretty well.
What have you noticed? I mean, I know we don't have any maybe hard data, but
Yeah.
have you noticed improvements or things are pretty much the same? What's your observation?
Well, certainly kids are more alert when they get to school. I can tell you that. But I don't have a lot of data on it. I just was when I was teaching in the middle level. I remember starting at 7:30. I mean, it was when you're starting at 7:30, you got kids getting there at 6:30, and stuff like that, which was just ridiculous.
And, you know, I have to say, I don't only feel sorry for the kids, I feel sorry for the teachers, because I always think to myself, how is it for that first period teacher when half the kids are sleeping? How could you not take that personally on some level? You know? But apparently it happens, right? That first period class, a lot of kids are groggy and having trouble waking up.
You know, I think something for parents to know is that Boulder Valley's, the school district has a lot of opportunities for people to be flexible with their schedule. I'm working with a teenager now who doesn't go in first period and takes an online course. So even if the whole school isn't, you know, starting later, people that need that, like you guys said before, you know, come talk to somebody. I think there's a lot of great ways that they can get support.
And I think bringing that up is a great thing, Dan, because I mean, we are moving in directions that will help this, I believe. Blended learning is definitely our future, and the future of education, where students are mixing their in-class time with online time, and in learning in both formats, and that will allow a lot more flexibility in the long term. And not too long of term as well, to help students to have a more flexible schedule and to be able to work at times that fit their body rhythms better.
And can I add, Jan? And, I mean, really coupled with that has been, and I've talked about this a lot, has been the institution of the Positive Behavior Support Program throughout BVSD. And the teachers and the staff that are working with kids now are so much better than when I was hired in the district a little over 20 years ago. I can't even tell you. And how they treat kids and how they work with kids, it is much more of a partnership than a we said, you do kind of atmosphere anymore. And that we have data for. We have this, the climate surveys that the students do every spring in the district have improved. I don't know, dare to tell me. I mean, they've gone up every single year over the last 5 years.
Is that district-wide, the positive?
District-wide, yeah, and it's district-wide. And, you know, every school has its own sort of iteration of it and things like that. But as people that have seen that have done open enrollment tours and stuff, everybody sort of has their acronyms, everybody has their things that they do to really support kids. But at the end of the day, what you're seeing is better teachers because of it. You're better teachers who are more flexible, willing to work, coupled with, okay, yeah, they may be taking that math class online. I'm not going to feel personal about that. I'm going to work with them to make sure I'm supporting that here in my class, that kind of stuff. We just see better people working with kids and the data out there. And they're not all perfect, of course, but roundly speaking, from a data standpoint, you're seeing a much better climate in Boulder Valley than I've seen in a long, long time. And there was a big emphasis placed on this and a big emphasis on making sure that we were responding to what was shown us in this student climate survey data. And there's been a marked improvement around the district with it. So it's been a big deal.
And for people that don't know, and I may not be characterizing right, so help me, maybe you can help me, Andy, with this, but the positive behavior support really tries to focus on what students are doing well, what they're doing correctly, calling attention to positive behavior in the hallway, et cetera, instead of just identifying the kid who's being unruly. Am I on the right track with that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Psychologists love that.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, the simple thing is, if a kid's running in the hall, you're saying, instead of saying stop running, you're like, walk, please. That just your way you're addressing them. It's a more respectful. It's that kind of thing. So,
Nice. We have one more. Oh, Hannah, you had some thoughts.
Going back to the late start, and what you all were talking about with the first period thing, I can speak for that myself because I have first period off, and numerous times, I go in and I continue to do homework during first, but last night was a great example. I had a lot that I wanted to get done, and because I had the option of having that I could go in later, I took advantage of it, and I actually slept in today, and I went to school before second, and my whole day was just better. It made a very big change that I slept in until 7:30. And then every Wednesday, since Fairview has block day, I don't go in until 9:40. And I know I look forward to that every week. But the first period off thing has definitely helped because I just moved to the Boulder Valley School District in Pennsylvania. We didn't have open enrollment. There was no open campus. Last year I started school at 7:40, and I got out at 2:36, but they have now changed it to where students start at 7:20 and they get out at 2:26, which I think is absolutely ridiculous because all of my friends from Pennsylvania have just gone downhill. And this may not be completely relevant, but a lot of them, because they have more free time in the afternoon, have resorted to doing the wrong things like drugs and alcohol. There are a lot of teen pregnancies happening now because they're not in school. They have that extra half an hour to an hour to do whatever they want because they don't want to do the homework because there's too much of it to begin with. But they feel rebellious in a way, and I have primary sources for that there's a lot. Boulder Valley School District is definitely a lot better in that sense because they've realized what they're doing wrong. I don't know if that's the right thing, but I love having the opportunity to have that extra half hour of sleep, and then in addition to that, having first period off because I get a lot more sleep, and I'm a lot more focused than I was last year, and my grades have improved and my learning ability has improved too. So,
And you're right, Hannah. Research is very clear that kids get into the most trouble, not on Saturday night, but Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. That's why I think we should have school from 10 to 5. Who's with me? It sounds funny, but I'm really serious. I think that would make a lot more sense for everybody. I hope I live long enough to see the day when that happens. Let's watch our last video. It's a little clip of Alfie Cohn talking about homework. And then we'll come back and comment.
In school, kids are asked to do more academic assignments when they get home. What's weirder about that is that we don't think it's weird. That we never stop to ask whether it's logical, whether it's consistent with our ultimate goals for children's development, or whether any research supports it. The questions I want to ask about homework are not the little bitty questions like, should we cap it at X minutes? I want to ask the question, why do kids need to work a second shift when they get home on academic assignments? The downside of homework is clear to kids and their parents, painfully clear. Kids who are frustrated, who are exhausted, families that are changed for the worse by the appearance of homework, the nagging, the homework wars, and even the fact, when you think about it, that parents who've been away from their kids all day, sometimes the first thing out of their mouth when they see their kid is, so do you have any homework? How sad is that? That the relationship between parents and children must be shaped by the school's agenda even after school is over.
This sounds a lot like what Hannah was saying earlier. And I can tell you that we had a lot of questions come in from our viewing audience about homework. I'm going to just read one of them to you if I can dig it out real quick. When I ask teachers why they are giving homework to my young elementary-aged kids, one of the things they tell me is that they are responding to demands from other parents. How can we support our teachers to have flexible homework options for different families? And how can the district help educate parents about what is age-appropriate homework? I would love to hear from Melissa, our elementary rep.
You know, we definitely have that that dichotomy. We have the parents who really want to spend that valuable time after school as a family. Kids are involved in activities, strongly feel that we've finished our day when the school is out. And there are others who want or need that homework piece to extend their kids, to help them catch up, to fill their afternoon, to help them get ready to jump math classes, to go to high school in 4th grade, just to get to college. So we do struggle with trying to make everybody happy. Our teachers, at least in the schools I've been in here in Boulder, try to spend their time choosing the homework that's going to really impact the learning and try to make other options available for parents who want additional homework. A lot of times at elementary, you'll see teachers give a packet that they have time to complete throughout the week where it fits. So in any one given night, they don't have to work every night, or it's not going to take all week, but they have choices of when to get it done, so the families can kind of plan for that. So I'd say there's a couple of things that I know that we're doing in our elementaries that I think are really helping.
What do you think would happen, Melissa, if at your school you stopped giving homework? What would happen, do you think?
If kids would read every night, that would be fabulous. Reading is one of those skills that creates that love for learning and just continues helping them grow. But other homework, we'd have to shift some of the things we do in class. So, I think teachers in my building spend an awful lot of time with very project-based, hands-on, engaging activities for kids. There isn't a ton of homework. I rarely hear kids, unless there's another struggle happening, another environmental pressure happening. I rarely hear that there's an overwhelming amount, like you hear some of the things on the videos. But if we just stopped doing it completely, we'd have to change the way we teach.
And from the high school perspective, just adding in a few more things, one would be, I think that a lot of our students, unfortunately, too, are also balancing their desire to participate in clubs, activities, or sports, or other things. But they're also, many of our students are working late at night, trying to support families and cover for and watch younger brothers and sisters. And I think that's an environmental piece or a family piece that plays a big role into, honoring students' time after school. I think that the only piece one of the pieces that's really sticking in my mind from that last video was this idea of the school setting the agenda for students' homework. I would expand that because I know that our teachers are trying to work through an immense amount of curriculum, whether it's from the College Board and Advanced Placement or from our local state standards, and I know they're working hard to bring that, into a smaller or more flexible way of working with students on the volume of material that needs to be covered. I think that this agenda that's being set is a national, state, and local agenda in terms of how much content our students are being asked to cover in 182 days of school. I think that how we use that time is something that we all need to think differently about, whether it's about homework in the afternoon, but flexible schedules or online or other things. I think those are pieces to the puzzle as well, given the amount and number of expectations that are put on students and teachers to get through an incredible amount of content.
We have 30 minutes left of discussion that we have to cram into 4 minutes somehow. I'm not sure we're going to do that. I'm going to jump around really quick in the last couple of minutes we have. I want to read a question that we had from our viewing audience here with us. Teachers interact with students all the time. As folks on the front line who are connected most deeply with the students, is there a way for them to be reinforcing Mr. Tucker's point about there being lots of good fit colleges? Leverage student-teacher relationships to magnify the message.
I think that's a fantastic question. I think that oftentimes, particularly at the high school level, teachers are not very well versed in the college admissions process. Unfortunately, it is really the realm of the counseling office to a large extent. Could there be education could the counselors educate the educators? Absolutely, and I think it's a fantastic idea, and one, frankly, that I will bring to my group, because it would be a very powerful way to spread that message. I mean, we do it to some level in the individual career and academic planning that we do. That is a piece of legislation that was passed a number of years ago by the Colorado State Legislature that requires that students 9 through 12 have an individual career and academic plan. So they've researched career paths and what it takes to get there and where they can go to college to study that and all those sorts of things. Here in Boulder Valley, we actually pushed it all the way down to 6th grade. Students begin in the 6th grade with the acronym is an ICAP. Students begin their ICAPs in 6th grade. So I think that education actually is already starting to happen with our teachers, because much of that ICAP work is done in the classrooms and done with the classroom teachers. It's oftentimes counselors that are delivering the curriculum, but teachers are present, so I think it's becoming a more and more understood process, but there's certainly much more that could be known.
And I'm going to jump around a little bit. I wanted to ask Kevin, somehow if you could do this in 15 seconds, I'm not sure it's possible, but talk about, because I was so excited to hear about it, talk about, we've discussed stress, which is really our overarching topic. Could you just tell us a little bit about that PE and wellness program that's going on at Boulder High School?
I think that several of the high schools are looking at this idea of what wellness would look like. So in 15 seconds or less, having conversations about yoga classes, conversations about expanding hiking, cycling, and cycling classes, so that students are able to go to a place and experience a broader range of physical education activities. And the idea of bringing wellness in is something that's coming from our PE teachers, and they're really excited about helping students talk about the things that they need to do to be well in their studies at school. And I'm really excited to see where the teachers take it. So.
Well, as a member of the community, I'm really proud of the changes that are going on in BVSD. I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Maybe it's never fast enough for me, but I have some impulse issues, which is another matter for another show. But I really appreciate everyone being here, sharing, and I really look forward to the community working with the school district, parents letting their schools know how they feel about these issues, and together as a community moving forward with really taking care of our kids, really looking at their stress level seriously, really doing some things to make some changes that make sense. I want to thank our sponsors, without whom this program would not be possible: Channel 22, the Boulder Valley School District, the Boulder Public Library Foundation, Louisville Library Foundation, the Parent Engagement Network, the Boulder Counseling Cooperative, the Boulder County Healthy Youth Alliance, Centennial Peaks Hospital, the Daily Camera, the Broomfield Library System, and the Hope Coalition. We really appreciate your support. We'll be back next month on February 25th. Our topic is marijuana and adolescence. And that's a big topic, given that marijuana was recently legalized in the state of Colorado. So I have a feeling we'll have a few opinions about that. So please tune in. And thanks so much for your watching. Remember that all of our shows are archived on the BVSD website, bvsd.org, as well as on the Boulder Psychological Services website. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Now the planet's done its bowing down, and soon the growth returns to follow ground. But I know what's churning underneath the snow, and I love my baby, and we've miles to go. Hey, 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 I'm okay. Be with me. We'll beat this, can't you see? So wait a while, winter time. Wait a while, winter time.